Okay, hello and welcome. It's Dr. Drredfrizzle here today, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about drug testing. So, right, first of all, there's 4 stages to drug testing. And the first stage is where human cells are grown in laboratories, so cells grown in lab. Right? Okay, so human cells are grown in a lab, and any side effects from this particular drug are studied. So you've got your cell here. So supposing there is side effects and side effects are harmful, obviously these drugs aren't going to progress to the next stage of drug testing, which is animal testing. But supposing they are safe, they'll progress to the next stage known as animal testing. So obviously the clues in the name about what this is. It's obviously testing the drugs on animals. And the reason why they're tested on animals is it's just to basically enable scientists to work out if there's any side effects that are going to be expressed in various animals. So obviously we've had this like cells. We've had this stage where these cells are like tested by computers and stuff, which have been grown in a lab. You obviously need to test it on the actual organism as a collective, because it might affect physiological and anatomical processes within the body, or anatomical parts of the body, I should have said. And the third stage is clinical trials. Clinical trials are tested on various volunteers, which is where human volunteers actually volunteer to actually take this drug. It's human volunteers. Volunteer essentially, which means they opt into taking the particular drugs and to actually check that they're safe. Obviously there is potential risks, but the risks have hopefully been eliminated by this computer testing here, whereas cells are grown in a lab and this animal testing here. And the last one is placebos. Now, I don't know if you've come across the word placebo, but placebo is basically a drug without the drug in it. You might be thinking, what on earth am I talking about? A drug without a drug in it? Well, supposing you like took a sugar pill, but you've been told that sugar pill was this particular drug that you're meant to be taking, then you'd think, oh, well, I'm sure this sugar pill is going to actually help me and going to solve my problems. So psychologically, your brain would tell itself that the drug is working. So you'd be able to compare that to the people who actually took the drug, so you'd be able to monitor the actual effects of the drug without having to worry about psychological impacts, because like some people will think that the drug's working even when it's not actually doing anything for themselves. Because they're taking it, they're going to think this is making me better, so they're going to expect it to. So whether it is or not is a completely independent thing. So that's what placebos are. They're just basically they're basically control variables. I don't know if you've done variables and stuff in science class, but control variables are things that are kept the same. So you need to control people's psychological point of views to enable the drugs to be properly tried out. I want to talk to you about a few examples of particular drugs that have been used and are being used currently, and how they've sort of got on really. I mean, there's a drug in the 1950s/60s, so right, 1950s/60s, and this was known as thalidomide. Now, thalidomide, what it was a drug which was actually prescribed to help with sleeping, so it was prescribed as a sleeping pill originally. But a lot of women, when they're pregnant, what they did is they took it for their morning sickness because they found it helped and relieved their morning sickness. But what they didn't realise is that this drug had side effects on the developing fetus inside their body, so like on the embryo inside their body. So when their babies were born, they had various deformities, such as like arm deformities, where they weren't properly developed limbs and stuff, so the legs and arms weren't properly developed, which was obviously a major issue. So thalidomide had to be reviewed and looked at again, and it's used in modern day times right now, and it's used to treat things like bone cancer and leprosy, but it's actually been properly tested for this use. The difference between the reason why this could undergo this sort of rigorous, which means like detailed and in-depth testing system, and still be enabled to be used, is because it was prescribed as a sleeping pill. People weren't expecting pregnant women to actually take it, so that's what led to the side effects. So we've hopefully learned from that mistake as a human race. So now we won't actually use drugs for the wrong purpose, which is essentially what this whole idea of illegal drugs is, which are people are taking drugs in recreational time or free time, and they're taking them just for pleasure, which of course is wrong. So you have things like ecstasy and heroin, and you have drugs like this. Now these drugs are illegal drugs, which means they're against the law to actually take them, so you're not supposed to take them. And these drugs can be classified in a lettering system, so you have A-class drugs, B-class drugs and C-class drugs. Now things like heroin are in A-class, so they're really serious drugs to take, which basically means the way it's classified is A is the most harmful and C is the least harmful. For C you've got, I'm not sure if cannabis has been moved up to B. They were discussing moving up to B because scientists have like linked people actually smoking cannabis to like various impacts on how their brain works, and things like that. And you also have other drugs that are legal, such as alcohol, and actually even caffeine. Now you're probably not aware that there's caffeine in coffee, but all that is it's like a stimulant drug. It's obviously legal, like alcohol and caffeine are legal, but they have a number of side effects. And pretty much any drug, the whole definition, the whole concept of a drug is it's something that actually changes the way that our bodies work. So it doesn't mean that all of these are bad, because like there's certain medicines that are prescribed. Every medicine you take is actually a drug, or has a particular chemical known as a drug in it. So this whole idea of illegal drugs, that certain ones can, like heroin's injected with needles and stuff, which can lead to HIV and hepatitis. You don't need to know too much detail about these particular problems, but you do need to know that they're there and that they can have impacts on people. And this whole idea of drug testing and drugs being used, you've got to be aware that drugs aren't to be seen as bad things, because there's certain ones that are bad and certain ones that aren't. All drugs, I forgot to mention, are, well, not all drugs, but most of the drugs are highly addictive. There are some that are only mildly addictive, and there's certain drugs that actually aren't addictive, which is why doctors' jobs are so important, because they prescribe drugs to people, which are known as pharmaceuticals, which go into the sort of chemical industry, after they've been tested, that the doctors prescribe it. And you might think, well, that's not a particularly important job, because they've been safety tested, so they're going to be safe anyway. They're not safe if you take them in too high doses, because all the drugs have to be broken down in the liver of the body, and supposing you break down too much of that drug, or try to break down too much of that drug, it may build up into toxic levels, because our liver can't cope with it. So this whole idea of safe drugs. Drugs are not safe unless they're carefully controlled, and drugs are things that have to be controlled and looked after. And to be honest, like taking these for recreational use, I think it's a completely hideous concept. It's a dreadful idea, because you're unnecessarily putting your body at risk of getting various problems. Which obviously you might think, well, why do people do it then? Well, there's a number of reasons for this, and one of the main reasons is peer pressure. So, for example, supposing your friends are saying, "Oh, you should be doing this," then you're more likely to actually do it yourself. So there's obviously other pressures, in addition to this peer pressure, that actually make you want to take it, which is the whole idea that it's going to make you feel better. And there's certain drugs that do make you feel better for a short time. Ecstasy, for example, it makes you feel sort of hyper and happy at the time, but afterwards it can make you feel severely depressed and stuff. So overall, in the long term, all of these illegal drugs are very harmful for you, and they will have a number of effects, regardless of what people who take them tell you. They'll probably tell you that they're brilliant because they're addicted to them and they feel like they need them. But that doesn't mean to say that you should take them, and they are severely bad things. The other thing, there's a little stat to this thalidomide that I mentioned. 10,000 babies were affected by this, and they had like deformed limbs and stuff, which is obviously very severe and very catastrophic actually. Which sort of reinforces the idea of this drug testing, and you need to know about it because it is such an important process. In like testing of medicines, you may think like you take medicines pretty much every day. You may like something you've got. So I don't know if you've got like you might take antiseptic, you might rub on antiseptic, you might take paracetamol as a painkiller. like for, I don't know, if you've got any pain at the moment, so you might have a throat infection or something, you may take and anti-inflammatories and stuff, which are also drugs. But the point is, these drugs have to be carefully controlled, so no matter how safe you think they are, you need to pay careful attention to the dosage on the packet, which is why drugs are supposedly kept out of reach of children, because supposing like a lot of child actually took a drug that was supposed to be safe, if it took it in a high enough dose and it wasn't meant to be taken, so it wasn't prescribed for it, then it's going to have disastrous effects for that child, and that child might even die. So this is why this whole idea of drug testing is so important. So I hope this video has been helpful in giving you a bit more of an insight into how drug testing works and the particular types of drugs. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section of this video. So I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.